Hello, and welcome back to EdTech Connect Innovators in Conversation. Today we have our guest, Dalia from Ziplines Education, the Senior Learning Experience Designer, with our VP of Sales and Marketing, Dipesh. And today we're going to have a conversation a little bit around micro-credentials, AI education, and where the industry of EdTech and education is heading in the future. So, Dalia, why don't you start us off a little bit about what is Ziplines Education, and it may be a little bit of a shameless plug about what's new for you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kiara. Thank you so much for having me on. Really appreciate it and really excited to chat. So as Kiara said, my name is Dalia Abbas. I'm a Senior Learning Experience Designer at Ziplines Education. At Ziplines Education, we design industry-driven courses to help mid-level career professionals upskill very quickly. So since you've just gone into a new job and you quickly need to learn a specific set of skills, and hey, you don't have time to go and get a master's degree or go back to school, Ziplines Education's partners with universities to get those industry-driven skills to that mid-career professional. So I work on the learning experience design team where I help design, develop, build courses and get them to market. So we're very excited at Ziplines Education to have recently launched our second AI course, AI-powered automated workflows, where we help professionals learn how to create automations on no-code tools like Pick.com and N8N to build automations that save you time, save you money, help you do your job better.
I love that. That's so timely given all this talk about AI and people trying to figure out now, like, what new no-code software is out there. I know Canva just did a release, so this is really exciting to hear from Ziplines Education. So I'm going to turn it over to Dipesh. I mean, I'm a little like, I know what's going on with Magic because I work here, but Dipesh, maybe you can give some insight into Magic EdTech and what's new from us.
So what Magic EdTech does is we help other EdTech companies, publishers, institutes build their learning products and platform, so which includes developing, designing curriculum content for them, digitizing that curriculum content, developing platforms and tools for these companies. We've been around for 30 plus years now, and we have worked with major publisher and institutes throughout this journey. What's really happening today is we're helping institutes use AI to streamline and innovate faster. So how can they bring products to market faster? How can they bring new courses to market faster? And how do we help use AI to streamline those workflows? So I think that's something I'm pretty excited about. And I think we are in an era where I was talking to Dalia before the conversation that we are moving very quickly. Like everything is moving so quickly. So yeah, this is great to be here. Thanks, Kiara.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we've already mentioned AI probably over like 50 times in just the introduction. So I think this is an indication of where we're going to head in the conversation, because these days you can't really talk about business education without someone mentioning AI. So my first question to you both is going to be, what concerns exist about the rapid adoption of AI? And you can speak towards this in education with your company, or just what you're hearing in recent trends and the buzz on LinkedIn. So let's start with Dalia to get your perspective on this matter.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say with the rapid adoption, one of my main concerns in general, both in education and just in the general industry, is that there's really nothing to support, the idea that AI should share our view of ethics and morality, right? Sometimes when you're using artificial intelligence, you tend to speak to it like a human being, but that doesn't mean that it actually functions like a human being. And one of my favorite examples of, that exemplifies what the potential AI could do, if it wasn't safeguarded and we don't put in the proper guardrails, is the paperclip example. Have you heard of the paperclip example, Kiara?
I have not. What is this?
Okay, so this is this is an example scenario proposed by philosopher Nick Bostrom. And the idea is this hypothetical system that goes beyond even artificial general intelligence, right? So just a quick recap. When we think about different types of AI, we have like weak AI, artificial narrow intelligence, which is kind of where generative AI goes under. AGI, strong artificial intelligence, right? Which is AI that's, smarter and more capable than a human being. And then ASI, artificial super intelligence. So that's a type of a type of AI that could make human beings obsolete. And to be clear, we're not at levels 2 or 3 at all, right?
Okay.
So in this hypothetical world, we're talking about artificial superintelligence. So let's say that there is a type of AI. It's the first type of artificial superintelligence. And its main goal is to produce paper clips. That's all it's supposed to do, produce paper clips, right? So it does everything it needs to do to produce paper clips. It gets really smart and it starts doing things that humans can do, like, trading stocks, making money, and just getting really productive at producing paper clips. So in this hypothetical example, remember, it doesn't have the ethics and morality that human beings do. So it discovers that the earth is 80% iron and it needs to create machines to now get as much iron as possible from the earth. And in so doing, it realizes it needs to kill some human beings in order to produce as many paper clips as possible. So this is quite a terrifying example. And again, we are nowhere near this. But the idea is we need to produce AI systems that aren't harmful, right? And at least have a certain level of alignment with some sort of ethics or morality system. But the problem is we don't all align on ethics or morality. And there's a lot of research going into this, but at base level, this is something that needs to be considered, in my opinion, with the development of any sort of AI system.
Yeah. Wow, that is an interesting example. I've never heard of that, but now I'm definitely going to be reflecting about that anytime I start thinking about ethics with the AI adoption. So I think you're totally spot on in that we don't have defined guidelines when it comes to AI. And I've especially seen this even globally in terms of how Australia is handling AI adoption versus the UK versus us in the States. And everyone has a different approach to it. And I hate to say it feels like we're kind of getting into this roulette of who's going to do it the quote unquote proper way. So it's like a uncontrolled experiment right now globally, but I love that example. I'm going to turn it over to Dipesh to see what he has to say about the paperclip or even just like rapid adoption from his point of view.
Yeah, I think the answer would have been completely different if you had asked me 8 months ago. The answer for me is very different right now because of the pace at which everything is moving. I have seen like some of the most skeptical AI skeptical people turn into like fans over the last 1 year. There were people whom I had spoken to who just didn't want to touch this, and now they have no other option. But so they are in some cases become fans. So I think there is that rapid adoption. My concern with AI is less with AI itself, which is there. Like I think I agree with all the points, but I think more with how people are using AI. So I believe if we don't use it correctly, we are outsourcing a part of our thinking to that. And I worry sometimes that, if, the erosion of our critical thinking, if AI is not properly used. So, depending, like just completely saying, okay, if AI generates an answer, okay, this is a good answer. Like what is good versus great versus extremely good, right? Like, that taste development. And that's easier for people who have the kind of experience, but let's say somebody's new in the job market who's never done this kind of work. How do they develop that skill for determining what is good versus bad? So I think that is I feel that one of the bigger concerns with AI. I also feel that, any attempts to guardrail will have to be done very sensibly because, this is one area where I don't know how much of guardrails are going to work. If we do strict enforcement, it's, people will find ways out. So I think it's a very, and I don't know if I know the answer, but I feel that, for example, if there were schools like I know New York City schools banned AI at the beginning, but then they now use a lot of school districts did that, right? So that is not the answer. I feel it has to be thought out a little sensibly in terms of rather than enforcing, guiding people. But yeah, my concerns remain of the erosion of some of these critical thinking, some of these softer skills. If you do not use AI in a manner as a thought partner rather than outsourcing everything to AI. So yeah, that's my way of looking at it.
Yeah. I feel like you kind of started touching on it, Dipesh, but that's leading into the next question in terms of why is this essential for individuals and people to understand the ethical implications and societal impacts with AI literacy and just the AI usage? You started touching on it, but maybe we could go a little further.
I think AI literacy is going to become as much as a digital literacy right now. Unfortunately, even today in the US and I'm sure across the globe, like digital literacy is not really there. Like, yes, there are people because we're surrounded by people who are digitally very savvy. You would assume that everybody is digitally, like there's a big digital divide. So I think the next frontier would be the AI literacy. So, there's a divide between people who understand AI and use AI versus people who don't have access and use AI. So I think it's going to be very important. AI literacy is going to be it's almost like internet literacy is going to be that important. My concerns with ethics and all, I think we have to apply our own ethical layers on top of what AI spits out. So developing those skills in kids as they're growing up, like, okay, apply your intelligence on top of, or your ethical layer on top of what AI spits out is going to be extremely important. So that's my thought.
Yeah. I think it's also now that we're talking about AI literacy, we need to not forget about this whole original concept of media literacy because we still have a wide access to information and we can put out media so quickly these days now with AI that even in a conversation session with Chicago Public Schools about their implementation of new programming, they even said now that we're building AI literacy courses, now's the time to refresh what media literacy means. So reestablishing the building block layers when approaching this new topic area of what is AI literacy and how do we get there. So I think this is like an important spotlight we need to also add into the conversation is this concept of media literacy again. So Dalia, what is your understanding and opinion about the societal impacts of AI literacy and what are the potential future implications if we're not reaching that literacy?
Yeah, thank you, Kiara. I absolutely want to share Dipesh's kind of fear earlier about the ability for adults to develop that skill to recognize good output, bad output, and especially agree with the fact of what both of you were saying, the importance of media literacy and digital literacy. And what I would just add to that is I think there's also the importance of data literacy. And the reason why data literacy is part and parcel of AI literacy is because in order to understand how LLM output is created, you need to understand the ways in which AI is trained, right? When you come to the understanding that the pre-training phase of LLMs involves a lot of arbitrary data, a lot of, Western data, a lot of English data, you come to understand that the output that you get is going to be skewed in some sort of way. And as time goes by, these models are going to get better, and the more data that's fed into these LLMs, the harder it's going to get, right? So that ability, as Dipesh noted, to be able to be critical with output, the ability to be able to distinguish and identify, where do I need to modify this output? Where do I need to double check? Where do I need to kind of look to another source? All of the things that you would do, Kiara, with, digital literacy and media literacy, those skills become so much more important. And in terms of your question on like ethical and societal implications, I think that if we don't get these skills under control, AI literacy, digital literacy, data literacy, I think that we run the risk of, individuals just creating a lot of output that isn't verified, that's biased, that has a certain gender skew. And I think that you also run the risk of a workforce that's not as ready for what AI is going to do in terms of their jobs. One of my favorite books on how to work with AI is Ethan Mollick's Co-Intelligence. And co-intelligence, right? Going back to what Dipesh was saying about how some schools completely were like, no, don't use AI. One of the first rules he gives for living in an AI world is to experiment. Like experiment, bring AI into every task. You don't necessarily have to use the output of what you're doing, but you need to understand how you level to the AI, right? Where are areas that the AI does better than you? Where are areas that you can do better than the AI? It's going to be essential in order to be able to compete in an AI driven economy.
Mhm. Wow, there's so much that you just said in there, especially like the fact that the skill set, it's no longer just, as we mentioned, like media literacy, AI literacy. There's much more levels to it, which I guess can sound intimidating for people to be like, oh my gosh, no longer do I just need to be literate with the media I'm intaking and creating. And now this whole concept of AI, you mentioned data literacy, which I think is also something we do need to focus more on into this overall conversation about skill set reaching into the AI literacy. Wow. I'm like, how do we even do this? We're not going to get into this conversation right now, maybe a future session, but I want to focus more on terms of those skills that we need to work alongside AI tool systems. Because you kind of touched on it, Dalia. Do you have anything else you would like to add in terms of the specific skills before I turn it over to Dipesh?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. In addition to the ability to use, identify, and critically assess AI technologies, right? All elements I would say that are part of AI literacy. I would also say that your interpersonal skills have to grow with you, right? So, with the AI courses we have, one of the first questions we get from students is, isn't it cheating when I use AI? Like, isn't it quite obvious when I present a deck or present, competitive analysis? So one of the main skills that needs to kind of elevate with your AI skills is your ability to communicate that you've used AI. And there are ways that you can do that. There are ways you can say, hey, I used AI to, take a first stab at this. And then I went through and added my own insights and made some modifications. Or, hey, took a look at this, used AI. What do you think? I'm just trying to get us to that MVP stage a lot quicker. So communication is the one that really stands out to me. But going back to what Dipesh was saying, I think also discretion, right? So knowing when you create something or when you build something, like maybe it's this product is better put in my words, or maybe my years of experience, with my years of experience, there's a better way of putting this or producing this or creating this, right? So that real, like, sharp, critical thinking skill of being able to recognize when should I be using AI, when shouldn't I be using AI, and how do I basically use AI as co-intelligence?
Yeah. I love that whole acknowledgement and giving credit when you're using AI with it, because I feel maybe partially what society and maybe some educational school systems right now, because it's so new, we're still viewing AI as cheating. But by acknowledging that we are using it, because almost everyone is using it these days, we're acknowledging that it is becoming an integral part of our workflow. And we need to own that, yeah, we did use it, but we are adding our own original thoughts onto it, as you mentioned. And I think by changing this perspective of our AI usage, it could really help shape our AI adoption into the workforce and into education in a more positive light instead of just this negative giant doing the work for us, right? So I loved your perspective you added there in terms of communication being such an important skill set because at the end of the day, we're all human, right? Need to communicate. Dipesh, what would you like to add in terms of the skills people need to work alongside AI tools?
Yeah, it's a very good question and something that I keep thinking about. I have two young kids, and I'm always thinking like, what are the skills that they need to develop to thrive in today's world? Because back in the days when I was in my education system, my skill was memorizing what was there, and I think that evolved to now critical. So I'm thinking, what is next, right? I read a couple of articles that were very insightful. One is knowledge work is transitioning to become wisdom work. So right now we are in knowledge work, but knowledge with AI is like almost becoming a commodity, so to say. So what is important is the wisdom to use the knowledge in the right way, in the right manner. And there are different skills within that. So one is, I think, as you mentioned, Dalia, discernment, absolutely important. Like, okay, good versus, so the skill there is taste. You use two products and you realize the taste of the people who develop this product. So how do you, and taste is, being obsessed with the right taste is going to be so important, because the AI can keep generating outcomes depending on how you keep prompting it, and that depends on your taste. So taste is going to be important. I also feel empathy is going to be very, very important. And this article, and it's a different take on it, but it's like, a lot of times we deal with jerks at workplaces because they bring certain skill to bear. Now that skill can be brought by AI. So we really need to become people who are competent to work with. So, so that kind of empathy is going to be extremely, extremely important. Understanding other people. So I think that, and the third in my opinion is curiosity. I think just, okay, is there a better thing available? And that curiosity to some extent requires a level of humility that, maybe I don't know the best. So maybe I need to probe further. So I think those skills, and these are soft skills rebranded, and soft skills are always important. I think those things are going to be extremely important. My other take is, and I may be completely wrong on this 10 years down the line, that I think liberal arts is going to make a comeback with this, because philosophy, thinking deeper patterns are more critical than today than STEM skills, because STEM jobs at some level are going to get automated. So I think the individual needs to get exposure to all of these things.
Mhm.
So yeah, and some of this might be wrong. We'll see, but that's how I think about it right now. And in fact, there was an article which stated that the unemployment rate in STEM is higher than unemployment rate in liberal arts today. So
Wow.
yes, so yeah, and that's how I've always believed in the power of liberal, like, philosophy and critical thinking and
Mhm.
empathy. I just think that it is going to be seen now. Like, how do these skills shape you up?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I've also read something similar in terms of like the comeback of the humanities, and then there was always jokes sometimes about the whole like, oh, humanities majors and especially philosophy, like, oh, what are you going to do with a philosophy degree? But then the articles are saying if you have a philosophy degree or you studied any part of the humanities, you're actually ahead of the game when it's coming to the AI adoption, because you have this more critical thinking and deeper reflection when it comes to interpreting the outputs of AI and then how you apply that information from what you were prompting AI to do. So I think again, like you said, Dipesh, maybe we're wrong 10 years from now, like, but I think it's relevant right now to what we're seeing in terms of developing AI and how we're using it. Any other thoughts in terms of the skills that people are adopting or needing to focus on with AI usage before we move on to our final question?
Yeah, I just want to agree with Depeche in that idea that liberal arts offers this robust set of critical thinking skills, writing skills that puts one in a position to adequately assess and analyze a certain text, a certain output. I think curiosity goes a very long way. So I wouldn't completely take away STEM majors. I think science, technology, engineering, that I still think they're super important. I would say that the education of the future just needs to infuse a lot more of that liberal arts thinking, right? So I feel like the best sort of education is one that's, not so singular and one that's not so binary, but, one that takes from both kind of more the STEM mindset and the liberal arts, because I essentially agree with Depeche that in general, like the education system that I was, brought up in did tend to be quite binary, where, liberal arts are on one side of, campus, and, the STEM majors are on a completely different side. And so I do think it's going to take people who have those robust critical thinking skills, but who also can understand the technology, the history behind artificial intelligence, technology, general purpose technologies. I think individuals who know the mechanics and then can help, you know, shape the future and shape the dialogue. I read something last week that said a lot of the people who are working on these artificial intelligence technologies don't understand the full implications. And, like going back to that humility piece that Depeche brought up, I don't think there really is anyone who understands the full implications of generative AI. But it's important that we have people who understand the mechanics at, a minimum.
Yeah, for sure. Dipesh, any final thoughts on
No,
that?
I agree. I agree 100%. I think it's a good point. What I think is it's going to be important is what do you call it? The foundational thinking, even in STEM. Like, okay, why does certain thing happen the certain way? So I think the foundational skills are going to be very, very important. Your base of, okay, not just why does this produce this result, but what is the why behind that? Like, okay, what is 101, right? I think that's going to be extremely important. And I think my final message would be that, if I think the best way to learn this is by doing it, like by applying it in your day to day, and going beyond the surface level of, okay, using AI to write emails, AI to, that's surface level that, but going beyond that to improve your outcome and improve your creativity, I think is going to be important. And I really value these no code tools that Dalia mentioned at the beginning, like these N8N, and it just kind of automates a lot of things. So I would highly recommend experimenting with some of these.
For sure. I am going to pause our conversation on the skill sets there so we have time for our final question. Now, I will disclaim that this was actually not my question. It was someone in the chat on a webinar actually posed this question when we were talking about AI chatbots and skills development. And I thought it was such a good question that I want to bring into this conversation today. So it's a little long, but in a future where every employee will be assigned an AI agent to work in conjunction with their day-to-day responsibilities, how do we incentivize people to think and not fall into the AI workflow? So we're talking about this whole idea of still using AI and not becoming used AI. And there's this whole new concept coming out about like digital dementia, in that we're just going with AI right away and using it to create our thoughts for us and losing that critical thinking and skills that make us human, as you guys were both talking about in terms of our skill sets to work with AI. It's a big question. I think it's a really deep one to leave off on, but let's get into it. So, Dalia, would you like to add your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, going back to what Dipesh was saying about the importance of experimenting with AI and just using it as much as possible, I would add to that in a world with, an AI agent that helps you with your work, or, automations that involve AI agents, or just an increased amount of, agentic AI. I would say that it's important to go back to that idea of taking the output and modifying it, making it your own, infusing it with your expertise and experiences. And it's a muscle that you build, right? Just like it's a muscle to take what the output is and kind of just throw it away, right? Garbage in, garbage out. And so I would say that experimentation is important, as Dipesh noted, but I also think it's important to seek out structured opportunities to learn ways to work with AI output. And we've seen from the various legal proceedings that are going on and that are going to continue going on in terms of intellectual property and rights to AI output, the more that you modify, make your own, and kind of work with AI output, the more of a right you have to it as your own work, right? So you kind of have to get into that, because I do agree that you could fall into this trap of not thinking as quickly as you used to because you're always going to AI, or just constantly relying on AI when the answer could be in your head. And my manager says this to me and my team sometimes, right? What I want to hear is, I want to hear from you and your brain. I don't want to hear from AI's brain, right? So I could use AI, kind of similar to what Dipesh said. Like, you have to find interesting ways to use it. And one of my favorite ways that I've been using it the past few weeks is as a co-editor. So I'll create something. I'm a learning designer. I'm constantly creating scenarios, content. And instead of asking it to create something for me, I'll give it something original that I've created. And I'll be like, ask as my co-editor, what kind of feedback can you give me on this piece? And I found in doing that, not only do I produce better output, but I'm getting a lot of really great feedback on my style of writing, my style of production, my style of thinking, right? So I'm learning from it. It's kind of like when you're in university and you write a paper, and instead of correcting all of your mistakes, what a good professor will do is kind of circle it, tell you what the mistake is, and tell you that you need to fix it, right? And so I love that. So I think you really have to find ways to work with generative AI that help you learn, as opposed to, allowing you to depend on it and use it as a crutch.
Yeah, I love that as a co-editor. I think I I might need to adopt one of those because Dipesh was in one of these trainings I did on Friday, and everyone was like, "Oh, there's a typo. It must be AI generated." I was like, "No, no, no. That's purely human error." That's how you know it's original now.
That's how you know it was yours. People know that you created it yourself. It's kind of charming these days. When you see a typo, you see a mistake, you see inelegance and kind of wording, there's the human touch, right? And I know a lot of people miss that.
Yeah. And in the past, we would shame like those kinds of human mistakes, but then now I feel like more appreciated because you're like, that's original, because AI wouldn't do that. So we're kind of switching our perspective and understanding when it comes to small mistakes like that. But I love this whole idea of a co-editor. I will need one. So switching it over to Dipesh in terms of how we incentivize people to keep their originality and perspective when adopting AI. What's your take?
Yeah, on first of all, on the typo thing, I always believe that these kind of mistakes are what makes you human. So a lot of times I've actually made typos. I've said I was supposed to send an email CEO of one company. I sent it to another company using that. And, I obviously acknowledged my mistake, but the person was kind enough to give me a meeting actually. So,
Wow.
sometimes, yeah.
There you go.
So I think mistakes are human. It makes you very human. Anyways, coming back to your question on the agentic AI, and I think like the way I work with my team right now is whenever I give them some task and they come back with first draft, and my question is, okay, is this the best output that you can create? And then they go back and even if it is good, they start thinking about it. They find ways to improve it. And after 3 iterations, it's a really good output. So I think sometimes you just need that, okay, need that extra prompt to kind of make you think in different direction. I think the same applies to AI. Like, when they get the first output, question the AI, okay, is this the best output? What are the angles that are missing? So I think giving it that feedback is going to be very, very important. So make it iterative. I think that is going to be extremely important skill to develop. And the second is, how do you not outsource your thinking? The way I do it and the way I think about it, and I work with AIs, especially when I'm thinking of something to write or something, the kernel of the idea or the seed of the idea is in my head, and I put it on my notebook, and this is what I'm thinking about. I just put gaps wherever my thoughts are not clear. Like, okay, I'm writing something and there are thoughts, or I would just put in bracket like this sentence need to be rewritten or whatever. But I'll just jot down my thoughts. This is because it comes directly from my head, and then I use AI to just enrich it. So that's how like the thought process remains with me, but AI helps me co-think and like, okay, this is how you're thinking, but maybe this angle is what you're missing, and that's how I work with it, rather than saying, hey, I want to write an article on productivity, and gives me garbage. So instead of that, this is how I think about this topic. This is how I think about focus, and I'm like, okay, can you help me out? This is how I think about assessment writing. Help me enrich it, right? So yeah, I think that's how I try to not outsource my critical thinking, because that's what is going to be the most important skill in the future.
Yeah, for sure. I love how you guys both have this very like, I'm maintaining my original thoughts with this and just using AI to help with critique or enhance it a little bit, but still like you own the content. It's still your expression of your thoughts, which I hope that as now we have younger generations growing into this new AI era, that we still find a way to place importance of being original and having your original thoughts as they grow up in the system and going into education, etc. Because again, it's so easy to fall into an easy pattern and just keep going with it and letting it guide us. But I'm glad you guys are still paving the pathway, and this is why we're having the thought leadership conversation about the importance of critical thinking and being original. All right. Any final words that you guys would like to add to our conversation today?
The only other thing I would add here, I really appreciate this conversation and really appreciate the space to be thoughtful. I think like going back to the very beginning of this conversation on rapid adoption, it's important to take moments like these to think about what we're actually doing and how we as individuals are making sure that we maintain our originality, our thinking, making sure that we're not outsourcing our critical thinking. And I think hearing about the different ways other people do it is really helpful. And I think, this is a time where, as Dipesh noted, being curious is really going to help you, right? So being able to identify your gaps, working with AI, understanding where you need to quickly upskill, and finding ways to do that in a structured way if you need to. I mean, I absolutely agree with Dipesh that experimentation is the best way to learn how to use generative AI technologies. But, you come to a point where maybe it helps to have a structured opportunity, right? We have CEOs of companies right now saying it is incumbent upon everyone to learn AI, and that's fine and great, but give people specific ways, right? Give them structured opportunities, give them, some kind of professional development stipend, create a learning path, right? I saw that the CEO of Zapier, another no-code tool, last week released a sort of chart that showed the different levels of AI competence, which I think is a really great start, right? Help your employee understand at a base level what are the minimum requirements. How can you be viewed as an AI expert, and what should you be able to do in order to kind of upskill quickly. So I think in this point in time, it's helpful to hear from people and how they're using it. It's helpful to demo how you're using it, but it's also helpful to seek out structured learning opportunities when you identify, where your gaps are. And I would say the same about skills in general. Like, I think AI is especially prominent in this time, but I think that you have to be curious about your skill set, figure out what the industry skills are, and figure out how you can quickly upskill and get yourself to that standard to continue to be hireable.
Yeah. I love the whole conversation around upskilling. And I think it was in your webinar that I originally attended about this concept of upskilling and deskilling in terms of AI adoption. So it's such an on topic right now in EdTech, but even in the workforce right now when it comes to AI usage and adoption. So thank you for that, Dalia. Dipesh, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I would kind of echo what Dalia said. I would just say that, I think take time to reflect on how you're working. I think we are so much on, and like when it comes to work, we are almost like, we have your day, you have your things planned for the day, and you are like almost on an autopilot. I have to do this task, I have to respond to this emails. A lot of times I think about this concept of work. Why is this the way it is? Like, why do we have to respond to these many emails? Why do we have to respond to these many Slack? Is there a different way to work? And I really think about that, the work was probably not created to be this way. It's how we made it. And I think, how do we now, so reflecting on these, higher level thoughts that, okay, am I working? Is this the best utilization of my time? Is this what I'm doing is the best way to go about it? I think it's going to be extremely critical. So meta thinking about how you're thinking about work and all those things. So reflecting on is going to be an extremely, extremely important way to live your life and live to your work, actually.
I love it. Well, thank you both for being here and having this conversation with me around AI and adoption, where we're heading in education. And I hope that we can potentially meet again and continue the conversation, as this is a always evolving industry and topic line in the news. But I think the main takeaway is that we are human. We need to stay curious and learn how we're going to lead this new adoption when it comes into education and the workforce of AI. So thank you so much, Dalia and Dipesh.
Thank you, Kiara.
Thank you.
Great to be here. Great to have this conversation. Thank you for creating a space.
Thank you, Kiara. Thank you, Dalia. Take care.
Thanks, Dipesh.